Julian Sethian has scaled SOSi into a mid-tier powerhouse without outside equity or set-asides, while betting big on innovation. From AI to ISR, he shares the pivotal shifts that define SOSi's niche and its vision for the next 5 years in this episode of Government Contractors to Watch, sponsored by J.P. Morgan Chase. Julian, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Terry.
SOSi's a really interesting case. You started as a language services firm, and now you're a mid-tier government contractor with a pretty broad portfolio. Tell us how you evolved the company from its origins to where it is now.
So my mother, who was a professor of applied linguistics, she founded the company originally to provide skilled expertise for a lot of the low-density languages to the for the federal law enforcement agencies. We were kind of this sleepy little company that nobody was paying attention to for several years until 9/11 happened. That was kind of a big turning point for us, when suddenly it became starkly obvious that the government just didn't have enough foreign language expertise organically to meet the demands in the post-9/11 era. So we started out essentially becoming among the largest suppliers of foreign language expertise to the federal government. That just put us in a lot of really unique spaces that we then use as a platform to grow and diversify the business from there. So fast forward to today, we've got essentially 4 core business units and then 2 subsidiaries. We have a technology and engineering business. We have an overseas logistics and supply chain business. We have a professional and technical services business supporting the intelligence community. So we've become quite diverse since then over the course of the last 25 years.
Was there any particular turning point on any of those additions that you made that helped you scale SOSi in a particular intentional way?
So we became acquisitive in the 2016 timeframe, and that was thanks to, in no small measure, to the banks that financed us. I mean, to this day, J.P. Morgan has been an extraordinary partner for us, helping us to grow and diversify our business. But that was really kind of the big turning point. I had made a commitment in 2016 to make a major acquisition each year from that point onward, and we've come close to holding that commitment since then. But really, in this industry, this is the ultimate roll-up industry. If you don't factor M&A into your growth strategy, it's really hard to scale and become $1 billion+ business.
So you really grew SOSi without small business set-asides or outside equity. You grew that internally. What holds all of those lines of businesses together for you?
At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if the government's buying F-16s or services. There's a certain methodology to doing business with the government. And once you master that methodology, you can not just grow, but you can diversify very, very quickly. And so at our core, we're a national security contractor. We follow the budgets very closely, but we make sure that our capabilities and the solutions that we offer are very closely aligned to whatever the national security imperatives are of the nation. And so what really kind of binds it all together is that we've got this sort of mission-oriented focus that permeates just about everything we do. And, we're national security contractors first, everything else second.
As you think about the space that you're in, it's very competitive. There are major primes. There's lots of folks trying to get in on the small business side. You sort of sit in the middle. How would you say SOSi differentiates itself? Is it agility? Is it depth? Is it special technical knowledge? What sets you apart?
I tell our people all the time, it's not what we do that sets us apart, it's who we are. We are the largest privately held company in the space that has no outside institutional capital in the business. What that basically means is that our planning horizons tend to be a lot longer. We take the long view on almost everything that we do. There just aren't that many companies like us out there. And we've been in business for 30+ years with essentially the same ownership. I've run the business for the last 25+ years personally myself. So it's really kind of the personal touch and just sort of this family-oriented atmosphere. So yes, we're a family-owned business. We really, try to push that culture down to the very last person within the organization.
Let's explore that culture for a minute, because you've described a very unique ownership structure in this environment. Family-owned, family-operated, and yet in the national security space, you've got to work with folks who are highly technical, highly cleared. How do you keep current in the job market and at the same time hold to that family culture?
Again, I think we've never had a hard time selling ourselves, as it were, to the talent pool. People are generally attracted to us if they have an entrepreneurial mindset, if they want to be close to the customers. We tend to have our intimacy with customers and their missions tends to be a lot greater than I think the ownership structures of some of our largest competitors in the space. And so we've never really had we attract a certain type of talent, and we've never had a hard time finding the right types of people to work for us. They've got to be mission oriented. They've got to be entrepreneurial. Really want to break new ground and actually make a difference, and at the same time be held accountable for results.
I would imagine your workforce is fairly distributed, as your clients would be. So how do you keep that culture sort of streamlined and focused when folks are out in all different kinds of plains?
So we're in 16 countries today. We've operated in close to 40 around the world over the course of the last 25 years. Maintaining a common culture across distributed work locations is an age-old challenge in this business because so many of our employees work in customer spaces. I make myself very accessible. I spend a lot of time on the road. We hold regular town halls with employees. Really genuinely, and then of course, over the course of the last 10 years, technology has become such that it's become a lot easier to communicate key messages and themes with a distributed workforce. And so really it's just about staying engaged, staying plugged in, keeping a very flat organizational and decision-making structure, and really spending time out in the field in the trenches with your employees.
You mentioned that one of your lines of businesses is tech integration. How do you keep SOSi on the front edge of technology adoption, and then how do you bring that technology through to your clients?
So, I think the industry is at an inflection point right now where, innovation really does matter. It's not just empty talk. What's really made a difference for us is, in the last handful of years in particular, establishing partnerships with non-traditional technology companies that are outside of the government contracting space and really becoming a facilitator or channel into the government space. Forming strategic partnerships with pure tech firms that are not government contractors first or tech firms first, government contractors second, particularly those with tried and proven commercial industry capabilities. That's really an important part of the growth process. And I think what's really set us apart in the last couple of years, we've a lot of the changes that are taking place right now in the federal acquisition world, so FAR 2.0, which a lot of people have made a lot of, a lot of those changes really play to our strengths as an innovative entrepreneurial business.
You mentioned the FAR. There's certainly a lot of change happening in how the federal government is acquiring everything from products to services, and especially in the national security space. If you were to look ahead 5 years or so, what would you say are the biggest challenges and opportunities out there in the acquisition space, and how are you positioning SOSi to take advantage of those?
Wow, that's a big question. A lot of companies are grappling with that right now. I think you're going to see a lot less FAR Part 15 acquisitions. The way the FAR is evolving, there's going to be a preference placed on companies that offer commercial solutions. So in other words, technologies and approaches that have already been tried and tested in the commercial space. And the use of OTAs has become extremely prevalent. I think it's close to $30 billion of awards have been made on OTAs this year to date alone, which is greater than it was in the prior year. Undoubtedly, that number will start to increase. Again, this is when innovation really matters. And so, I think you're going to see an increase in FAR Part 12 acquisitions, unique capabilities that are brought to the forefront that have already been tried and proven in the commercial sector, and then scaled through best-in-class vehicles through FAR Part 8. The way we are adapting to the new marketplace is we're looking for opportunities to productize things that we do. So we have a collection of products, so real no-kidding IP that we own, that we've developed in-house, or that we've acquired through acquisitions, that we're really kind of leading with technology at this point, leading with those products, and also looking for opportunities to identify clusters of services that really genuinely are differentiating. So things that we do that other competitors don't do, that we can then productize, build some brand awareness around, and then lead with those as we approach the marketplace.
Very much back to what differentiates you in a very competitive space.
That's true.
Julian Setian is President and CEO of SOSi, and this has been Government Contractors to Watch, sponsored by J.P. Morgan Chase. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search J.P. Morgan Chase.
Sean O'Keefe, former Navy Secretary, NASA Administrator, and senior leader across multiple presidential administrations, reflects on the principles that shaped his long federal career In this episode of Lessons in Leadership, he joined Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA, to discuss motivating teams through uncertainty, leading across agencies, and staying rooted in mission during times of public scrutiny and change.
Hello, and welcome to the Lessons in Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Sean O'Keefe, former NASA administrator, former deputy director of the Office of Management and Budget, former Secretary of the Navy, former comptroller and CFO of the Defense Department, and professor emeritus at Syracuse University's Maxwell School of Public Affairs. Welcome, and thank you for joining.
Well, thank you, Shane. Delight to be with you. Appreciate it very much.
What first drew you into public service, and when was it evident to you that leadership was an important part of the roles you played?
Well, I grew up around the public service. My dad was a career naval officer. He was a submariner, and we lived all over the place throughout the country. And as a result, I got an up-close and personal understanding through him, as well as through all the folks he associated with and the environments he was working in, just what the extraordinary value is of public service and what is it that would motivate people to want to be engaged in it and to be really involving themselves in what is something larger than themselves. And the only place that is really formulated properly is within the public sector and the public service. That again is the beneficiary or the beneficiaries are the citizens of the nation, the community, and the region in which you live.
Did you think about leadership early on, saying I need to be a great leader and therefore I'm going to learn how to do it, or did you just naturally evolve into it? Any thoughts on that?
I guess it evolved by the great good fortune of being witness to several really extraordinary leaders, people who really did take the initiative to engage others in the task, to pull together and motivate folks to really contribute their very best to achieve an outcome. And I saw the value of that on multiple occasions and found that was the primary ingredient, the trait, the characteristic that needed to be exhibited is the fundamentals of leadership in moving everyone engaged towards a common objective.
You have served under several presidents. Can you talk a little bit about that? What were there challenges to overcome, or were you away from politics so you didn't get? Talk about that a little bit. How does it differ as you serve through a transition, or does leadership stay the same?
Oh no, it's it's really critically important in transition cases, to be sure. But the two presidents that I served in their administrations were President George H.W. Bush and President George W. Bush in two different eras, obviously. But as a consequence, that was the closest I came to understanding the nature of the individuals who were in that ultimate leadership capacity, and their capability to motivate. Both of them were just extraordinarily inspiring people who motivated everybody to be part of the solution. But most importantly, they also had a capacity of really designating what needed to be done, and you knew that they were perfectly prepared to do it themselves. And that made the task that much more achievable. There were several different circumstances in understanding what the objectives of the senior leadership are all about.
You've worked for different kinds of organizations, political administrations, and then government departments, agencies, and then private sector, and now academia. How does that affect your leadership style? Or do you find that leadership, the core tenets of leadership, are applicable no matter what the organization you find yourself in and having to lead? It doesn't matter where you are, that the core leadership characteristics are the same? Are they different? adapting?
Well, there's a common myth in my judgment, and I'm probably the minority view of this in the academic field of public management. That common myth is that you can't apply the same principles in the public sector that you do in the private sector.
Yeah.
I never found that to be an impediment.
Okay.
It was always a circumstance where, strategy, the focus on the talent, people engaged, the process to going through decision making, the integrity imperative that must be there in order to demonstrate the absolute conviction of what's intended here, as well as the moral standing of what it is you're attempting to achieve. All those factors are very much the same. It's going to have its nuances, and there are very distinctive, differentiators within those organizations and those sectors. But at the same time, those basic principles, those tenets, foundations of what make up organizations and organization theory, in so many ways are fundamentally the same. And how you employ those may be slightly nuanced to match the condition, but they all are imperative in the same direction.
A little bit of a different direction. You were part of the very first cohort of what is now Presidential Management Intern Program, later became the Presidential Management Fellows Program. What did that early experience teach you about leading within government?
The Presidential Management Intern Program, as it started, was designed for just that purpose, a focus on public management, a focus on implementation. And its evolution over time has been extraordinary. It mystifies me why that has been the subject now of an executive order that has dismantled it. And it's absolutely unconscionable given the nature of the hundreds, thousands of people who've moved through that program in the course of the last nearly 50 years that have gone on in some cases to be senior executives within the federal government, and in other cases they've moved on to other kinds of pursuits. But even with that, even for those who have left the service, they walked away with an appreciation of what public service is all about, why it matters, and why this is so critical to get it right. Because by and large, the reason why these functions are delegated to the public sector is because no one else can do it. Usually that's the case. It takes that kind of focus of a public entity in order to achieve an outcome that frankly would not be achieved in other spheres. So as a result of that, it gave me an incredibly in-depth understanding of that process at a very early stage in my career that has lasted the entirety of that professional experience.
A closing question. Who has influenced your leadership style, and what about their example stays with you? And that question can be cast broadly. So, inside government, outside government, perhaps not government at all, somebody that you've met, reported to, been mentored by, a broad net. But when you think about broadly, when you think about who has influenced you, who comes to mind?
I would have to say that the number one, hands down, greatest influence during the course of my life was my dad. He was an engineer, so everything was a calculated risk. I think I was probably 25 before I realized the answer was not to be found for everything in a slide rule, but that was his bent and his mindset. And he taught me how to think critically. And it really was one of the most extraordinary attributes. And he was an inspiring parent and mentor in so many ways. And all the different things I've done throughout the course of his life, I had the opportunity through much of it to be able to consult with him on a variety of things, and always walked away with a more informed perspective Ed was an extraordinary public servant in his own right.
Well, Sean, thank you very much for sharing your insights and experiences. It has been a pleasure talking.
I'm delighted to be with you, Shane. Thank you so much for doing this.
And this is Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA, reminding you to empower your team and embrace challenges. Until the next time on Lessons in Leadership.
Find the full podcast and future episodes of Lessons in Leadership on the Federal News Network app and anywhere you enjoy your podcasts.